Good morning. I love a crowd who gets up this early in the morning to talk about murder and gore and blood.
I do too. My kind of crowd.
Um, Gillian, it is such a pleasure to be able to talk to you. Thank you so much for being in the festival.
I am so glad to be at this festival. It's one of my favorite things about Chicago. I always attend, so I'm glad to be here.
We're going to talk, as Scott mentioned, part of the reason we wanted to talk to you at this particular moment is because you're involved in doing this HBO series version of your first novel, Sharp Objects. But I wanted to talk to you because I didn't know this at the time, but there's been all this breaking news around you, including that you're going to be doing this new series for Amazon, Utopia, which is very exciting. So I just wondered if we could talk a little bit about that and what's going on with that, what that's all about, and
Sure. So I'm very excited. It's my first series that I'm going to run myself.
You're everything, right? You're a creator, showrunner, executive producer. You are all the things.
Writer, yeah, exactly. So, yeah, it was a series that I started years ago. I can clock it by my daughter, actually, because I started writing it with David Fincher. So David Fincher and I were working on Gone Girl, and he sent me a text one day saying, like, hey, do you want to work on this TV series with me? Like, it'll probably take, the next several years of your life or whatever.
No big deal.
Yeah, exactly. So I started writing it when I was pregnant with my daughter, and she is now a big and bold and very sassy 3.5-year-old. So it has been, as TV does take a while to get going. So it has been that long. So I started writing it that long ago, and so now it's finally coming to fruition at Amazon. And it is about a group of comic book nerds who find an underground graphic novel that's kind of near mythological proportions that they think has the series the secret to things that are going wrong in the world, and maybe
it's kind of like a dark state thriller. That's what deep state, right? Mm-hmm. The deep state. So
and things start going wrong very quickly. It's based on a UK series, and I kind of took it and ran with it, and so we're hoping to shoot here in Chicago, actually.
Woo!
Yeah.
Isn't that exciting?
Yeah, exactly. I love Chicago, so I'd like to keep it here. So, yeah, the scripts are all written, so it's about kind of getting it up on its legs.
And as you said, when you first started working on it, you were working with David Fincher, and is he going to be involved? Is he going to be?
I was, yeah. No, that was years ago now. Yeah. He is now doing Mindhunter, and so now I'm doing this solo. Yeah.
Okay. Well, something to look forward to at some point.
Hopefully next year. Yeah. Hopefully next year if all goes according to plan.
So this is proving, this space of film, television series, original series through Amazon or Netflix is proving, and then HBO obviously is proving really fertile ground for you and the kind of writing you do. Do you feel, you did work as a film and TV critic for 10 years, and I know you moved around the world, you were on sets and things. Did that prepare you in any way for thinking about moving out of writing a novel or a piece of fiction to writing for the screen?
It did, because it trained me to think a lot about why TV and film why it works and why it doesn't work. And you can always tell why something really bad doesn't work. That's pretty easy and fertile ground, and it's why critics have so much fun with things that are really bad, because it's very easy to boot that around. What's really harder are those very mid-range, C-level type shows where you think, you sit there and go like, why doesn't this just not,
Right.
does this not quite work?
It looks good, but I'm not really engaged.
Yeah, it looks good and I want to like it. You know, that stuff where you go in like, I really want to like this, but it just doesn't quite work. And so that trained my brain for a long period of time to like think about why things don't quite come together. Is it the acting? Is it the directing? Is it, the quality of photography? What is it about this that is not quite clicking here? Also, I grew up with a dad who was a film professor.
Oh, that's right.
So that helped. And that's what we did, mostly every week. What he would take me, that was our dad-daughter date, is he would take me to the movies, but it was never just like taking the kid to the movies. It was taking the kid to the movies and then afterwards was like, well, Gilly, like, what did you think about the film? And it was never just like, I liked it or I didn't like it. It was like, no. What do you think about Bambi? No, why? It can't just be like, I'm sad when Mom died. It was like, how did that work for you? So
I'm like,
I don't know why I'm making my dad sound like the Colonel.
Right. Did you figure out, you alone or you and him together, what it is that makes something not work when it does look like it should work? Do you know what that missing ingredient is? Is it like you?
Personally, with my own writing, I can usually stop and say like, oh, it's this scene, you ended it incorrectly. It's the pacing. It's a logic problem that you're being too lazy to really stop and fix. I can usually, and then sometimes I have to pass it on to either a trusted friend. My husband's a really great reader, particularly of my novel writing. So sometimes it's like, this is like, what's wrong with this? I do pass it on to someone else to look at.
I read a great quote from you that when you were writing the screenplay for Gone Girl, that you and your husband were reading it to each other, and you couldn't tell if it was bad, but maybe that was just because you weren't very good actors.
I'd be like, hello, Amy, how are you today? It's not feeling natural. I wonder what that is. I am going to kill you. Yeah, I was like, I think this needs a little zip to it.
So let's start talking about sharp objects. First of all, I mean, I can't really see you guys, but so maybe clap. How many of you have read Sharp Objects? All right. So for those of you who haven't, I'm just going to give a very quick and jump in because, this is the story of a journalist living and working in Chicago, in some ways living her best mediocre life, who is assigned to go report on or to cover the murder of two young women, two girls in her hometown in Missouri. And so, she goes to do that, but then it also is a kind of confronting her own past and an investigation of her family and what happened, and the kind of stuff that unspools or unravels from that is like pretty
gothic.
Pretty gothic, very compelling. I mean, it's just like an incredible cast of characters. I love your characters. I mean, they're just really amazing, fully realized people, obviously. But we talk a lot about likability. And you could say that these characters are not likable, but that doesn't really capture, someone like Camille.
Yeah.
I mean, she's got problems, but.
Yeah, I mean, I always think the word likable or not likable is bandied around too much, especially in Hollywood. You always hear that only about women. That's the only time you hear that word ever used.
Yes.
Mad Men, Don Draper, Breaking Bad, Tony Soprano. You never hear like, is he likable enough? So that is only thrown out about women. So I always say, like, the question is not likable. The question is compelling, interesting, whatever. And identifiable isn't even the word actually that I'm looking for, because Camille is not going to be identifiable for people. But it's can you empathize with that person?
Mm-hmm.
And to me, I think, with my characters, I think almost always you go back, a little bit about their childhood, because I think if you if you know about the childhood, you can, even with Amy and Gone Girl, you know a little bit about her childhood, so you know a little bit about what made her who she is. And with Camille, it's very much about going back to the roots of Camille and in Sharp Objects. She goes back to her hometown. You understand exactly the environment of where she grew up in and what she was dealing with, and it's all about what made this person who she is.
Mm-hmm.
And so even if you don't identify with her, you're understanding, and you're kind of understanding what made her what she is.
Yeah.
And I always say, that Sharp Objects is much who is she as it is a whodunit.
Whodunit. Yeah, yeah. And because it is a Gothic tale, there are a lot of false leads. There's a lot of kind of hazy stuff you have to push your way through to find the truth, because it does seem to be a story in some way about discovering the truth, right? Mm-hmm. So this is a story that has a lot of violence in it. There's the violence of the murders, the two young girls. They're murdered in a pretty horrifying way. There's probably going to be spoilers for those of you who haven't read it. So, but there's also Camille herself is. She is I want to read the way she describes her because I love it. It's kind of it sounds like a line from a nursery rhyme. She says, I'm a cutter, you see, also a snipper, a slicer, a carver, a jabber. So she cuts herself and attends to herself. And then her mother, it turns out, has this illness, which was such a great twist, Munchausen.
Munchausen by proxy.
By proxy, so she doesn't try to make herself ill or imagine her, but she tries to make others ill, and then
so she can care for them.
Yeah.
Oh, we're going there. Okay.
Yeah,
so we're really
going,
okay. So,
right.
All right.
So I'm going into the details, but what I wanted to ask you is, how do you go about, representing that kind of violence in a series? So it's one thing in a novel. How did you start thinking about how am I going to represent all of these things on the screen?
As far as with Camille, that part, the cutting is done. She's a recovering cutter, so we see, what we see with her is the scars that are on her skin. She got with the violence she has done to herself, and she is in recovery from that. Just she is still a drinker. She drinks in order to kind of quiet that urge and quiet that need. So she's you see her kind of constantly drinking. She's drinking throughout the series. And it's very clear kind of that constant need to soothe and quiet herself. And and she's very aware of sharp objects. You see her constantly sort of craving them and wanting them, and touching the edge of needles and the edge of writing pens and that sort of thing. That she's always, anything with a sharp edge, she sort of has that, like an old friend. So, that is sort of a constant awareness for her that she has to quell. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is a struggle with, in some ways, it's a really subtle exploration of what our violent natures are, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's the explicitness of her cutting, but there's the explicitness of the violence of that community she's in, which is both physical but also mental violence. Yeah. These women are incredible. They're incredible at the mind fuck, I would say.
Yeah.
They don't, and it's generational.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so in thinking about how you would, I guess, communicate that, because in a cinematic way and through images and through kind of, a narrative for a series, were there things that you had to reframe, or I'm just curious about what that process is like for you.
Yeah, what we did was we all sat down in a room. Sharp Objects has the same director all the way through, he's the same director who did Big Little Lies. So he was very familiar with sort of the tribal female cliques.
Yeah.
He was kind of already the verbalization of that. But he was still finishing Big Little Lies for that. So the writers' room for Sharp Objects did talk a lot about that, like what should it look like. And to me, Sharp Objects was, when I was writing it, was about the aggression and violence of women. It was, and at different stages from different generations. So Adora, who's the mother, who came from a generation where it wasn't okay for women to be rude and aggressive and, mean at all, turns aggression and rage in on kind of inward and uses it to be seen as this perfect caregiver. She turns all her anger, she turns it around in this twisted sort of way, and it turns into Munchausen by proxy, and it turns into, like, she revisualizes herself as this perfect 1950s sort of, caregiver, and that's what that looks like when that's thwarted. To me, Camille, who is of my generation, which is, sort of a Gen X generation, is a different one, but it's still not, entirely this emancipated rage where women can be entirely of themselves and fully vocalize that when we were growing up. And so she cuts herself and turns that rage inward. Now, Anna, the youngest sister, who also was, raised in this sort of cesspot of a town where women, still have all these issues. Well, she's of the, kind of girls gone wild, texting, say whatever you want to, put everything on the internet, put everything on social media generation. She does kind of whatever she wants to, and she feels perfectly fine to do whatever she wants, and she's kind of running around town, completely the queen bee and fully, entirely of herself, sort of running the town at age, 13, 14, and we actually have her on a pair of roller skates. You can watch the trailer online, and you'll see her rolling around town because she doesn't have a car yet, but she's hell on wheels.
I love that in the novel too, that the teenagers drive around town in golf carts because they can't officially drive. But
so instead of golf carts, we thought roller skates.
That's a great.
They're all like scary little troopers on roller skates.
That is definitely scarier than a golf cart. I love that. That's a good. Well, so in talking just the way you were talking now about these generations of kind of female violence and the ways in which it interacts with their social place. You've talked a lot about how we can't even begin to approach talking about women as violent. And in fact, that often we're so focused on empowerment that we forget about our dark sides. Mm. So why is that? Why do you think we're so hung up about acknowledging? I mean, these are fantastic characters in a novel, but I think anyone who's read this can relate to that kind of meanness among women, and to some of these kind of dynamics that you're talking about, that our violence is sometimes expressed against ourselves, not always against others. But so what's the hang up with just like being more open about this?
Yeah, I think it's still this strange circular path that we take, that we don't feel, as much as many strides as we're making, that we still maybe don't feel comfortable expressing ourselves fully across the aisle towards men, even when we're angry at that. And so we do loop around on each other and turn on each other. I think there is still a problem with women lifting up women and pulling women up. I still see that a lot as a problem. And so I think there is still, as much as we say like, oh, sisters love sisters, and I think there is more of that, I think there is still this fear that there's only room for only so much of us at any certain table. That is how we have felt for so long. That's what we've experienced for so long. That there's only so much room for success, whatever sphere it is in. I think that's changing, but I think whatever part of society you're in, that there's only room for only so many of us, and so that of course turns into a sort of awful feeding cycle where we treat each other poorly. And I do think that's where a lot of that comes from.
Yeah. So, in making, so the film Gone Girl, this now series of Sharp Objects, and some of the other work that you're doing, you're putting women at the center of the kind of true crime narrative in a way, and maybe with a particular entry into that narrative. I mean, a lot of what we're seeing is stuff like that puts men at the center. It's men who are investigating. It's men who are traumatized in some way. What do you think it does, or what are you trying to understand by putting women at the center of the true crime, not as victims, although there still are female victims in your stories, but as agents?
And male. Don't forget about Desi. Don't forget about Desi.
Yeah. Poor Desi. I'll take a moment of silence for Desi. Neil. But what does it do? What do you think it does to put women in the driver of those narratives?
Well, I think it makes us more than helpmates. I get so tired of reading books where women get to come in and assist a man in the investigation or assist a man in general. And, that's what so long it has been. It's like, oh, well, we have women in the story. And it's like, yeah, well, they're the wife who gets to be a bitch, or and you look at, and again, not to harp on, I love Breaking Bad and Mad Men and Sopranos or whatever, but you look at the great dominant dramas on TV of the past years that people talk about being the great defining American narratives of the past years, and they're about men, and the women get to come on and do things and be intertwined in the narrative, but they don't drive it by any means. And to me, I'm a woman, so I'm interested in women. That part of it comes just down to that. I don't want to write it necessarily entirely from a male point of view. I wrote from Nick's point of view, and Nick's point of view is probably more my point of view than Amy, thank God, than Amy's. Probably is more my,
You mean because you have similar circumstances?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, in terms of being a writer, or in
terms of being a writer, and in terms of not being, it's homicidal.
Well, he is a cheater.
Not that part.
Yeah.
Not that part.
Let's just get it.
I got to parse this out more carefully. But yeah, I like So to me, it's interesting for just the sake of driving the narrative, and also it gives me a chance to talk about. I think men are certainly not short of stories. So to me, it's interesting to have that chance to talk about from a female point of view, things that are from a woman's point of view.
I think what I love about these three female leads, I'll just focus on Camille, Amy, and Libby from Dark Places, is that they are not only the agents of the story, but they are the agents of narrative. So Amy literally is writing the story, right? Mm-hmm. And totally messing with us in that process, right? So she's driving all of the events that unfold, and then having to kind of when things don't go as planned, then picking it up and driving them to do it. It's just so diabolical. It's fantastic. She's so amazing. But even Camille and Libby have a power, and it comes back to that repression thing you were talking about, what they will reveal about their stories, what they know about their stories. Libby doesn't understand entirely what happened, but she still has this kind of agency, with the Kill Club, what she's going to tell them, or what she sees, what they value of her story, so what she'll sell them, to make her own living. And Camille, too. Camille is so, I think, desirous to have a particular kind of narrative that, there's a central thing that happened to her as a child that is a part of why she's, inflicting pain upon herself, that she's still struggling to identify, is this a rape? Is it, or does she want it to be something else? Do you know? I just think there's something very kind of amazing you're doing with these women and how they're trying to sort of think through what happened and refusing the terms that others might say about what happened to them.
Yes, yes, I think that's very important that they are that that they are trying to recycle through their childhood, recycle through, um, like you said, the story and the spin of what we stamp on women, and resisting it, and choosing to decide what they want to say about themselves for themselves, and you won't. I like that they're not likable. I like that they resist being likable. That they say, like, as as Libby calls herself all sorts of names, like, I'm a liar and a cheater, and I choose to be all these things, and that's the truth about me. That they do sort of resist being societally appropriate sometimes. And I think that's important. I think to me, that's important, that we see characters, that we see women narrators and lead story generators who aren't exactly perfect, because to me, it's tremendously important to see women in all arcs, from good, and I think I'm always like, I do write good female characters too, like like not a lot, but Go as would be a likable female character.
Boney, Boney the cop.
Boney the cop.
Boney.
Boney the cop.
Great character.
That you see them from all angles, just the way you see male characters from all angles, and that's never questioned at all. The anti-hero, the male anti-hero, is a long return to concept in American novels, and it's just called an American novel. And I think, I would love to get to a point where that's just a common thread in female characters too, because I think that's important that we get to that stage, that's an important sort of thing. So I guess maybe I push a little too, theoretically too far on the other side, because I'm just trying to sort of get there. Yeah.
Right, the balance, yes. For too long, we've been too nice.
Too long, too nice. That's my rallying cry. That's my Alexander Hamilton.
What about, so it's hard not to imagine that you're not thinking about big, broad social and political issues when you're writing these, like the recession of 2008 is the backdrop of Gone Girl, for example. But I wanted to ask you about Me Too and Time's Up and this sort of emergence of thinking about some of the things you were just talking about in terms of women and their place in the world and what's happening to them. And you wrote in Time magazine, I think you said, like, it was kind of like your Kanye moment. You said America
Which one?
Yeah.
Which Kanye moment? Oh.
The one when he said, that the president doesn't like black people or doesn't care about black people. Because you said America values women less than men. I mean, maybe that's less, and that we are not the people, we are the subjects of the patriarchy. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. But where do you, because I know also you feel like that it's a really valuable movement, but that does it prevent kind of certain conversations between men and women? So how does this all fit in? What are you thinking about what's happening with women right now outside your novels?
Yeah, I think we're at a very frightening, I'm very frightened right now, to tell you the truth. I mean, I will be honest. I think we're at a place where we can go forward in a very useful way, or step backward in a frightening way. And I think we both women and men need to be vocal and consistently vocal, and push constantly. And I don't, I think the Me Too movement and what we've seen being exposed is one thing, but it's the more quiet stuff that is is that consistent layer that's the concerning thing. And I think, what frightens me is that men and women will stop having the conversation, like you said. I think that we need to all band together, and I think that we don't want to go off into our separate spaces. And actually, that's the book that I'm writing right now. The novel that I'm writing right now is very much all about that.
Oh, really?
What happens when that happens, and that I'm throwing all my unsettling 3 a.m. gut fear into that.
Wow. Is this, I mean, so with
and you've not seen a bad female narrator until you've seen this one, my friends.
Does she have what more can you tell us? Does she have a name?
Exactly. So I'm trucking along at it. I'm hoping to get done with the first draft of it by the end of the year. Get it. Yeah, it's coming together. It's coming together, but it is a dark sort of meditation on America right now, and the what's going on between the genders.
Wow,
that came after the election and is moving forward.
So because you wrote the Utopian series, are you moving in more of a dystopian or fantasy or sci-fi
right now I am.
Yeah, that's wild. Like, what's that all about?
No, I wouldn't say this is not, what I'm working on is not a science fiction. It's sort of an alternate reality, but very much set in present day.
Okay.
But it feels has a dash of dystopian. Let's say Margaret Atwood's my friend.
That's what I was thinking about.
I mean, not really my friend. I wish she and I went out for like girlish cocktails together and did our hair, braided our hair.
Yes, a lot of us have that fantasy.
I know, right?
I think. Yeah. But have you been watching The Handmaid's Tale? Do you watch stuff like that?
I am re-girding up for the new season. I'm excited, but it is very hard for me to watch. It is hard for me to watch it.
This is this comes back to that question I was asking you earlier about representing the violence of sharp objects. Because what I find I struggle with The Handmaid's Tale is watching all this horrible violence against women.
Yes.
And we're at a moment where we're talking about violence against women, right?
Right.
The violence that is not necessarily physical or extreme, but it's the violence of, the inequality of the workplace, and that there's a spectrum of that. But so I guess I just want to push you a little in thinking about how do you navigate that, right, in wanting to depict violent women or talk about violence and women, but also that part of it where it's really difficult to watch.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and it's been difficult for me to watch sharp objects for me personally because, Camille carries a lot of my own personal demons on her back. So to get back in there and explore that and to watch what we do to each other, and to really see that it's hard. You want to intercede, and I have a daughter myself, and she's 3.5 years old. She is a little tiger right now, and I want to do everything I can do to protect that. And you just sit there and you worry constantly. And I also worry about, and the same thing as I worry about my son too. Like I also don't want to, in raising her up, I don't want to feel like I'm quashing him down. So, how do you navigate those two emotions? I don't want to, as I wrote in the Time article, I don't want to be constantly girl power. And he said to me, well, what about boy power? And it's like, you already have enough boy power, you little white male, like, you little 7-year-old white male powerhouse,
Right, that's your next novel. Can we talk a little bit about what you just said, the demons on your back? Because, obviously you've talked a lot about how your novels aren't autobiographical in the sense that your parents aren't, your mother isn't Aurora or, the amazing Amy parents who create this whole daughter they wish they had. But you obviously have a connection to this material, whether it's you two got laid off during the recession after you'd had a 10-year career as a writer. But I mean, what's the demons part of that in thinking about these women for you? How do they connect to your experiences?
I would say, I don't want to speak for all women, but I would say personally for me, I have this self-destructive vibe or self, that self-hate reflex.
Mm-hmm.
I have that in me, and I have that, and I feel that trigger, and it's not triggered necessarily by one specific thing, but that is a constant battle, and that tendency toward, I'm not a cutter, but that tendency toward wanting to destruct myself, to that self harm, that self negation, that I don't. Again, I don't want to speak for all women or all men, but I do think it's a more common female trait than it is a male trait. That sort of sweep back in, the constant battling of the wave of self, that one is self-harm, that one is self-hurt, that one is whatever that is. And for me, it is a constant trying to build up the shore again. Yeah.
How much do you think that is about, right, I mean, you're talking about you personally, but it's obviously something a lot of us can connect to.
Mm-hmm.
How much do you think that is a social thing and it's a matter of roles? Like if you look at Aurora in Sharp Objects, probably she shouldn't have been a mother, or the mother was not a role where she could exercise care and all of that. There might have been another way. But that's what she's got, right? And a lot of us struggle with that, male or female, the roles that we have. That's Gone Girl too. I mean, it's not just the bar that's meta. Amy and Nick are in a relationship that's about being in a relationship, right? About being in roles.
Yeah.
And the next speaker here in this space, Thi Bui, is a very different writer. It's a memoir. Her family are refugees from Vietnam, but part of what she said her book is about, it's a graphic novel, is about how hard it is to be a kid and how hard it is to be a parent. And I wondered if that resonates with you, or thinking about how hard it is to be a woman or a man, because there's these really heavily prescribed norms around those roles, and yet there's no guidebook to how to do any of this stuff.
Or else there are too many guidebooks, too. You know what I mean? There are too many, I think anymore, there's too many, there's too many ways to do it. You're constantly, this way, and none of them quite fit, because we're all constantly shifting and we're trying to figure it out. And it's so, it is, these roles are so constantly hard to pinpoint what it is supposed to be, and that you always hear you're supposed to be you, do it yourself, and it's well, what who me how be me what's that supposed to be, because I also don't want to be me, because I'm in my head all the time and it's dark in there and it's scary, turn on the light, sorry, this is you're hearing an inner monologue. But it's hard to be a man. It's hard to be a woman. It's hard to be in a relationship. It's these barriers are constantly causing us trouble, and yet we change them all the time, and they change generationally too, and so we can't figure. We try to be like what our parents were like, but that's not the correct answer either. It's so complicated, and we never give ourselves a break, or else we shouldn't. And then it's this constant struggle.
Yeah.
But I agree. In Sharp Objects, it's all about what it is to be should you be a mother? Like, I agree. It's some people should not be mothers. Some people should not be. And oh boy, some people should not be partners. At
Yeah.
certain periods of their lives. So, it's all a lot about that.
Well, I think we'll try and bring a little light in by literally raising the lights and taking some of your questions. And so Dana and are going to walk around with microphones. If you have a question, put your hand in the air. Wait for the mic to get to you because we are recording this program, and we want to make sure that you are part of it. So what you got?
Hello.
Hi.
Oh, goodness. Okay. Hi, how are you, Miss Flynn?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. First of all, I just want to say I'm a big fan of your work. I
Thank
love all your
you.
works. And secondly, I just wanted to know what really inspired you to write all three of those novels, and what type of perspective did you have or still have about the concept of marriage when you wrote Gone Girl?
Whoa.
Yes. They,
Those are big questions.
Those are, yes. The about marriage. I started writing Gone Girl like when I was a newlywed, because that seemed like the right time to present my husband with that bundle of weirdness. Seemed appropriate, but I had been asking myself actually like a lot. I got married, I was not a spring chicken when I got married. I was almost 37, and so I'd had a lot of time to I was not someone who necessarily thought I would get married. So I had made it was kind of like a big, yeah. So it's kind of like a big decision, and was like, okay, like I'm getting married. Being a writer, I thought about it too much. It was like navel gazing, like about marriage and the institution of marriage and all this sort of stuff. So I spent way too much time like marriage. What does it mean to be married? What is a good marriage? What is a bad marriage? What all goes into it? And from that froth came Gone Girl. All right. Well, you are welcome. So you are all welcome. Yeah. So that was a little bit. It was sort of really that idea of what makes a good marriage, what makes a bad marriage, and all that sort of thinking of it. So. We've been married 10 years this year, so something came of it. Thank you.
Hi. I know it's been announced, you've been talking about all this and like trying to bring women into the spotlight with your writing. And I know it's been announced that you're working on the Hamlet adaptation for the Hogarth Shakespeare series.
Yeah.
So does this mean we're getting a female Hamlet?
You know what? I have not decided, to tell you the truth, what I'm going to do with it. That is a big. I will tell you, I got Hamlet largely because no one else wanted to touch Hamlet, because why would you ever have enough cheek to take on Hamlet? And so all the other smart writers who had come to that series picked up other plays because they, and it was like, by the time they came to me, it was like, and you can have Hamlet. So I don't want anyone to think that I was like, I'll do Hamlet because I have such an understanding and brilliance of Shakespeare knowledge and history. I love the play, and so I'm excited to kind of take it on. And I've always been fascinated by the character of Ophelia. I remember even like all 16-year-old girls who come to Hamlet was like, what, Ophelia comes on and then she's drowned in flowers, and what is her story? So there's much to be mined there too, I will tell you. So I'm excited to kind of take it on. I have several actually Hamlet classicists who are going to help me get much more into the play and help me kind of dig around in there. So I'm looking forward to it. Thanks.
Hi.
Hi.
I am a writer and a therapist that deals with people who have experienced childhood trauma.
Oh.
And so your books have a lot to do with childhood trauma, and you seem quite astute about it. So I was curious if you study self-injury, Munchausen's by proxy, like what do you do to sort of get yourself steeped in it?
I will tell you I don't do a lot of research, and particularly with sharp objects, I didn't. I started to look at self-injury and think about doing it, and I got worried about appropriating anyone else's story, and I really didn't want to do that. And so I just really uh, imagined it. I imaginated it up. I really just thought about what that must be like, and how that must feel, and what sort of need that can come from, and the childhood feelings that would make someone come to that. And I certainly am no stranger to to need and obsession and trauma myself. Just because I'm not a cutter doesn't mean I don't have plenty of other troubles. So that one particularly, just I was able to kind of feel my way through. So I don't do too much. I don't interview anyone really. I don't read too much. I really kind of I just write my way through it, to tell you the truth, and kind of hope I get it right. And I have been I have been really fortunate to have been in touch with, through social media, with a lot of people who are do self-injury, and they've said it felt right to them that they've used that book, but as a vocabulary to be able to give it to people, to say this is what it feels like to me. So I'm glad of that, because there's nothing harder than having an illness and not being able to describe it to someone else. And so to be able to have that vocabulary, I think, is really important. So I'm happy that that's been able to be of use to people. So thank you.
First of all, yeah, I really enjoy that you create fully realizable human beings who happen to be women. It's
Thank you for
really
putting it that way.
refreshing to read. This is a question that came to me after I read a lot of the Goodreads reviews, and a lot of the criticism is very gendered, even though it kind of pretends that it's not. A lot of it is coming from women who are voracious readers and who I follow as well. So I was just wondering, of course, nobody would think of it because, you're a success in like, nobody, you're arguably a success because like your work is a movie, it's a television show. But how do you deal with, just these kind of criticisms? It may seem trivial on the outside, but like even personally, have you ever had to justify to yourself the creation of unlikable women, or ever sell it to people around you? Like, how do you deal with that just in your head, having to, I don't know, writing these characters? I know it's very roundabout, but like I often see myself even having to justify to people why I kind of like the anti-hero. And they're like, oh, we were not feeling her, it's just like, why is she so weird? And I hate that I have to say why I empathize with it. Like, I don't know. It's
Is that with Gone Girl in particular?
Gone Girl, even with I saw even the criticisms of sharp objects. They were like, it just like
Yeah.
just this kind of like resentment towards why you would write the mother like that. Like motherhood is supposed to be this selfless act, and this selfishness, and I don't know, it just made me really angry. And I'm like wondering if you ever had to fend off those questions about why these characters are actually compelling.
Yeah. Oh, I figure I, I don't try to fend them off because there's not much to say. There's not much criticism to make. To me, it's sort of like if you are saying that you don't like difficult women, then that says enough to me, sort of. That kind of tells me what I need to know. Yeah. And that I'm not going to get that far with you by trying to argue with you. You know what I mean? I'm not going to ever make a person who doesn't like a difficult character like a difficult character. It's like, they're just not ever going to do it. It's like saying, I don't like cowboys. Well, but they got the hat and the pointed boots, and to me, it's sort of like that. It's not worth the argument, sort of, and so I don't usually jump in. It's like people. A lot of people come up to me and they wait 20 minutes in a book line and they slam the book down of Gone Girl and say, like, I hated this book. and they've usually come with their book club and they've had to come. They've been forced to come. And they're hated this book. And I'm always like, oh, what do you hate about it? And it really doesn't bother me. I would so much rather someone dislike my book than read the book and go like, I liked it, and never think about it again, because then it's really tapioca. Not even tapioca, it's vanilla. It doesn't even have the bubbles.
No texture.
No texture. To me, I'd rather have them, I'd rather have them like not like it. And so then it's sort of like, okay, well, I'm always like, well, what do you like about it? Well, there's no justice. Okay, so you're a person who likes justice. Like, I'm never going to make you like this book. It really doesn't. It doesn't bother me that much, just because it would bother me if someone says the writing's crap. That sort of thing. Where then I'd be like, what? Then I would go to war, because then it's something I can be tangible and get into about. If it's if it's I don't like, women who are difficult, then it's like, well, then don't read my books. You're never gonna be happy. So.
Just a quick aside, I love that scene in Gone Girl where Nick and Go and Boney at the end are like having coffee and they're like, yeah, she got us, that there is gonna be naming one, damn it.
Yeah, tip of the hat. What are you gonna do?
Yeah. Brilliant.
We have time for one more question, but before we get to that, Kelly, our house manager, has some notes for you about the book signing.
If you guys plan on getting your book signed, we're going to be holding book signing in the theater today, so please stay in your seats and allow all of the exiting patrons to leave the theater first, and then we'll release you guys into the line section by section to get people through in a timely fashion.
Thank you. And our final question.
Hi.
Hi.
I am a huge fan of thrillers and fiction since I picked up my first Patricia Cornwell when I was 12. And as I've evolved, I read Sharp Objects and Grown and Gone Girl and loved it. Obviously, it's grown with me, and I think about it a lot. But recently, 2 weeks ago, I finished I'll Be Gone in the Dark. I've been on a true crime kick,
Right.
and I would love to hear your thoughts on the recent arrest and if you think there's a connection between the release of the book and the arrest.
Yes.
Just so everyone knows, you
Yes.
wrote the foreword to that book, and
That
that's
is-
kind of come back in the news with the arrest of the
Yes.
Golden State Killer.
And that is my only claim on that book. I had I had nothing else. Michelle McNamara, who is the author of that book and did all this research, she was beyond an online detective. She's from the Oak Park area here originally, and she passed away before she could finish this book. But it was finished, and she brought to life. I absolutely think that I think her online presence, first of all, and her constant work on this book and this case, absolutely. I think what it did was bring a cold case back to life, and her constant banging the drum about the DNA, the DNA. There has to be, somewhere these cases are going to connect. These two, the horrible two acronyms, the EAR and the ONS, the Golden State Killer. It's in there, and yeah, I think absolutely. I think that she brought notice to it. That book brought notice to it, and it brought what it did is brought the cold case back to life. And then the cops had it all. Were able to have that task force and bring it together. Yeah.
I have one final question for you related to that, because you have said that you're, like a lot of us in this room, a fan of true crime, and I think you called yourself a collector of nasty killers. Are you drawn to the idea of, and not that you don't have enough to do already with everything you got going on, but like doing a treatment of one of these like infamous killers in maybe a nonfiction form, or do you think about approaching it in that way?
I don't know. I went to Northwestern here because that's what I thought I would do. I thought I'd be a criminal, true crime or criminal reporter or some sort of thing. That was my original plan. And I found out very quickly that I was just not tough enough. I really wasn't. And I don't, Michelle McNamara, who again wrote I'll Be Gone in the Dark, which if anyone likes true crime should pick up. She had this amazing combination of grit and steel and warmth and this ability to get people to open up. And I think that's what a true crime reporter has to have. And I don't think those are present in very many people. I think I would crumble pretty quickly. I do better imagining of my own awfulness than I do poking around in real awfulness, I've found. So I'm a coward, is what I'm saying. I'm an emotional coward.
Well, I want to thank you for helping us all imagine our own awfulness. Gillian Flynn, it is
You're
amazing
welcome.
to talk with you. Thank you. Thank you for your question.